All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics in Conflict Show. Very, very excited to be with you. On what day today? What day is it?
It's February 13th.
My goodness,
Yes,
it's halfway of
halfway through
where time
February.
goes. Where time goes. Anyway, guys, we're very, very excited to be with you here. Like I always ask, please type in where you are joining us from. I always like to take a look at that. Well, we got an interesting topic for you today. I don't know how many of you have looked or listened to the recent interview by Tucker Carlson with the Russian president. What came out of it? There is a lot of stuff too. Of course, we can't cover this in one session here. There's a lot of messages that the Russian president sent, but today we're going to focus on one particular aspect, and it has to do with revelation of the truth as to who really was hindering or preventing or blocking, whatever term you want to use, peace from being achieved in the Ukrainian-Russian conflict. So it shouldn't come to you as a shock. Yeah, you guys don't, because once we're going to get into the detail of the information, you're going to understand why it shouldn't come to the shock, because the whole Western or the collective West have lost credibility, no matter what they say, no matter what they do. So this is what we're going to be talking about. By the way, if this is your first time, make sure to subscribe to our channel. And also want to remind you guys, tomorrow we will be doing locals tomorrow, not Thursday. Elizabeth will be out of town, so we decided to do it tomorrow. So if you would like to join us tomorrow at about, what is it, 14:30, around 14:30?
Yes.
So Elizabeth always gets confused with this military timing. And the funny thing is, I never tell her the time in Zulu.
No.
Zulu time. So 2:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. So we'll be on locals tomorrow instead of Thursday. Usually we do Thursday. So, all right, let me see quickly here who's joining us from, because I always like to take a look at that. And I know some people get upset because, it takes them forever to get into the topic. Come on, guys, chill out. Life is too short. Oh, Chanel, good to see you as always. Chanel, always on a channel here. Bojo is the true useful tool. But I also add this, Chanel. He's also the useful idiot. And that's what I'll add. DX Express, good to see you. Jason Smith, good to see you. Dorosier, good to see you. Ivana, good to see you. Poseidon, I like that screen name. Good to see you. And love from, you know where he's joining us from? Romania.
Oh, wow.
I've been in Romania. I've been in Bucharest back when I was still in the government. So I went through. Elizabeth Robb, good to see you. Sam Bate from Malaysia, good to see you. Very, very excited to see you guys. Hong Wan, good to see you as always. All right, let's get into our topic here, because
and also really quickly, we're going live on Rumble immediately after this.
Oh yeah,
because there is a lot to. I'm just I'm chomping at the bit, man.
Yeah,
this
well,
is
it's because
insanity.
also we know how YouTube approaches.
Oh my gosh, but this is absolute insanity.
It is, because it tells you who is directing the policies.
Absolutely.
This is why I feel comfortable, even with this Tucker Carlson interview of Vladimir Putin. We're gonna ask the legitimate question. Was it an interview or was it a talk show?
Well,
let's face it.
And so Vladimir Putin actually asked that exact same question at the very beginning.
Yeah.
He said, "Is this a talk show or are we having a real conversation?"
Yeah.
And it's interesting because he immediately jumps into a very long, at least it's not long, but sitting and listening to it, at least for me, was a little bit long.
Yeah.
History of the Russia and Ukraine conflict going back, I think, to the 800s. And, I sat there and I really thought about that for a second, because, I said this was an opportunity for Vladimir Putin to also get his information out also to an American audience. So why would he do something like that?
Well, first of all, it was a reason why he said, is this a talk show or an interview?
Absolutely.
The reason he said that is to put Tucker Carlson in his place. Tucker Carlson is not versed in geopolitics. He's a historian major in history. That doesn't, sort of geopolitics and history, yes, they may go hand in hand. But for the Russian president, who is a very, very, very shrewd and pragmatic and been around long enough to know how to read. And I did say this last time, he knows how to read the geopolitical landscape. He put that for a specific reason, to really put Tucker Carlson in his spot.
Yeah.
In other words, it will be now for Tucker Carlson. Do you want to take the conversation into the geopolitical realm, which, by the way, Tucker Carlson will not be qualified to do so? Or do you want to take it in the form of a talk show, given the background of Tucker Carlson when he was in Fox, when he was in some other networks? That was the reason why the Russian president stated that. Now, there is something I do push against Tucker Carlson for all this. You know?
Okay.
And again, I am not criticizing the guy. I just have to put things in perspective. If you listen to Tucker Carlson's speeches or statements about China, is the complete opposite. So to me, it was always that double standard. What gives you a right to give the platform to Russia, but not China? In other words, for the Americans to hear the Russian perspective, which is great, but also, shouldn't the American also hear the perspective of the Chinese? And that's, to me, I found it very troubling. And again, I'm not judging Tucker Carlson. I mentioned this before. I'll be happy to debate him about this issue if the opportunity presents itself, because I don't shy away from this. You know, as a geopolitical analyst, hypothetically, if I am to be put in that position to question or interview the Russian president, I will also consider interviewing President Xi. It's because it makes perfect sense. To rise into superpowers, you're going to have to provide both sides of the arguments for the American people to understand. So knowing what I know about Tucker Carlson's statements regarding China, that China is going to dominate the world, is going to take this, we have to worry about China. Well, wait a minute. You didn't say this about the Russians. You know, and I'm not saying he is, you know, he's not pro-Russia or pro-whatever. You know, we beyond that kind of.
No, I don't. I absolutely don't think so.
But when you deal with geopolitical matters, you have to be very well balanced in your assessments. You can't say, well, we're going to give the platform to the Russians, but, oh, China always still be the enemy. You can't do that.
Well, but I will say this about it, because, you know, first of all, I respect Tucker Carlson enormously for going and doing this.
That's true.
Because he absolutely did not have to. He did not have to go and get a fair and balanced view of anything. And if you listen to his questions, they're not just one-sided. They're very clearly like, okay, I'm interested in finding out the truth, but I am also going to, you know, see if I can hold you responsible for this.
Okay.
So I do think that his questions were balanced, but to speak to the China thing. So I do think, and I hope that Tucker Carlson does do that.
No, I am doing that.
No,
I am going to do that.
I know.
No, I'm joking, but that will be a privilege and honor to do so. Actually,
Absolutely.
I will prefer to, of course, interviewing presidency will be an honor, but my conversation will be much better with Wang Yi, the former minister.
Absolutely. And I think that's
given his background,
a very interesting conversation too.
Yeah.
But I think that this is the first step, because this is the first time that the United States has actually even heard from the opposing side in an interview by themselves. If you look at every other conflict that we've been in, where has that person ever had a voice?
That's
true. The first time that that's ever really happened. And so I absolutely applaud Tucker Carlson, because it took guts to do it. And a lot of the things that we have been saying that have been coming out, it turns out that they were true.
Well, first of all, Tucker Carlson didn't question the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. The interview was not. You have to understand the setting in the geopolitical landscape. This was not an interview per se.
Okay.
Hypothetically, if I were to conduct this interview, the questions will have to be structured differently, first of all. And it will be questions, because here is the reality of it. And let's just not sugarcoat it. The Russian president had an opportunity far more than in a setting of an interview, diplomatically or geopolitical one.
Yeah, it seems like a conversation in a lot of ways to me.
Well, this is why I'm saying, you go back to what the Russian president said at the beginning. Are we having an interview or are we having a talk show? That is the key to it, because from that question, you can see where the things is going to go. And it became clear to the Russian presidents that Tucker Carlson I ain't gonna be conducting an interview per se.
Yeah.
The question, because those questions have to be very, very, very poignant, very measured, and very sort of specific if you are to address the geopolitical aspects of it. I agree with you that it was courageous of him. I applaud him for this. I am not denying this, but I also challenge him on the notion that I heard a different conversation vis-a-vis China from him. So, but again, to me, it was like.
But at the same time, like there's a reality to taking. If Tucker Carlson and I'm not saying that I agree with this. Okay? I absolutely believe that China should also have its own situation where it's able to express itself firsthand. I absolutely believe that's true. What I am saying, though, is that the reality is that if Tucker Carlson was trying to feed to the American people both at the same time, I think he would have lost a lot of people. Because right now, how many narratives can you combat at once? And the reality is that you should combat all of them. You should combat all of the bad narratives at one time. But realistically, people can only take what they can take. And I think that this gave the American people the opportunity to understand that there actually is a different narrative and there is a different side at all. And I'm very glad that it at least woke some people up to the truths that have been going on with the Ukraine situation, not just for the last 2 years, but that I think is the value in Vladimir Putin actually having gone into history. First of all, that there is a large history here. You know, in the United States, we don't focus on history. Why is that? Our country's not very old.
Well, it's only 200 years.
It's only 200. But what was happening in this continent before that, right? The people who were native to this land were the ones who had that history. Not the United States.
The white man per se.
Well, there was multiple countries that colonized. So I'll call them the colonizers because there were other countries who colonized, right? And so we don't sit and we don't go, oh, well, it's back to the 800s, because if we were back to the 800s, it would be the native people of this land. And so the fundamental lack of understanding that we have of history, I do think it was interesting that he went in and did that.
What also for a reason is to also expose the ignorance of the American audience.
Yeah, that's what
that was one of the reasons for it, because we are, and I don't shy away from say it, and I don't care what others think. It's like, well, you too negative about America, whatever. That's nonsense. It's my country, but it's nonsense.
No, we're trying
it's
to
because
save
we
America.
are poor readers of history. We do not understand history. This is one of the things that, for those who argue in Washington that, the Russians have to turn back Crimea to Ukraine. That must be the stupidity of the highest order.
Yeah.
Because if they understand history, they will understand there is no way on earth that the Russians will ever turn back Crimea to Ukraine, or now the eastern side of Ukraine. It's gone. So, but again, it's because the history we don't understand. The reason that the Russian president address that is to expose how vulnerable Americans are when it comes down to understanding history.
Oh, absolutely.
So, and even the administration is going behind and saying, not behind, but rather countering this interview by saying, oh, don't trust what Putin is saying. He is it's a weak argument from none other than the liar John Kirby on behalf of the White House. The president himself, the incompetent president, our president. He's not my president, by the way. So, and all that stuff. It shows you that to counter that argument now, because the truth is coming out.
Well, and the Senate just passed the 95 billion Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan package, right? Like last night. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, if that's okay with you, David.
Of course.
Because that's a really big piece of this. So this interview came out, and the thing that we're, here to talk about is basically that there was an accusation made by Putin that Boris Johnson.
Well, it wasn't an accusation. Turns out to be true.
Right.
It was true.
Yes. And
it is confirmed.
Putin has actually been saying this for a while, right? So this isn't new. It's just the first time that really reached an American audience.
Yeah, they didn't know. We didn't know.
Right.
I mean, some of us who were aware of what's going on, we know the deal.
And if you guys are watching, you were also
you guys were aware of when the idiot Boris Johnson won over to Ukraine. You don't know why. Now, the key question to that, you know what the key question is?
What?
Under whose orders he went.
Absolutely. Well, do you want to watch the video?
Sure, let's do that.
Oh,
Let's do video, guys, quickly here.
We have a bunch of clips for you guys because this is just absolute. To me, this is insanity.
Yeah.
Okay, let's put this video up. Can you guys see it?
No, it's not
There
up
it
yet.
Is.
Is it?
I don't know.
I don't know.
There it goes. All right.
I don't deal with tech stuff.
As of February 2024, he has the latitude, the freedom to speak with you or your government directly about putting an end to this, which clearly isn't helping his country or the world. Can he do that, do you think?
Why not? He considers himself head of state. He won the elections. Although we believe in Russia that the coup d'etat is the primary source of power for everything that happened after 2014. And in this sense, even today, government is flawed. But he considers himself the president, and he is recognized by the United States, all of Europe, and practically the rest of the world in such a capacity. Why not? We can. We negotiated with Ukraine in Istanbul. We agreed. He was aware of this. He even put his preliminary signature on the document I am telling you about. But then he publicly stated to the whole world, we were ready to sign this document, but Mr. Johnson, then the Prime Minister of Great Britain, came and dissuaded us from doing this, saying it was better to fight Russia. And we agreed with this proposal. And the fact that they obeyed the demand or persuasion of Mr. Johnson, the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, seems ridiculous and very sad to me.
Wild, right?
Very, very interesting. And he won on his capacity as the Prime Minister of UK. So, there's a lot to unpack on that. But like I said earlier, the key question is under whose orders he went. You know, well, we all know the UK. It's what I don't even know what word to describe it. UK is gone.
Yeah.
So what I mean by this is the idea also that any foreign policy, UK does not have an independent foreign policy. UK will have to, as one who works in Washington, I was aware of our communication with certain entities inside London when it comes down to foreign policy decisions. So UK cannot move an inch without approval or green light from the United States. Now, if I am to take you back to the US independence from Britain.
Yeah.
The UK had a hard time to swallow that pill of reality.
Yep.
Now they used to be the master, now became the under, sort of the servant, shall we say. UK never got over. I mean, now they are okay with it because they have no choice. They never got over how a colony became the major power.
Well, and that happened overall. It's actually very interesting that you bring that up because, David, a very similar thing is happening at this point in the fall of the unfortunately, I don't want this to be the case, right? We're on the ship that's sinking.
Yeah.
And for everybody who's saying we're anti-American, it's not about that.
No.
I think you and I are both doing what we can to try and save America by having it save the United States, by having it be better on the global stage, by having it bring something that's worthwhile, build up the world with good foreign policy instead of tear it down with bad foreign policy, right? So interestingly enough, the UK, Great Britain, what did it used to be? How many different, how much of the world were they in control of once upon a time? A ton of it, right?
Yeah, there were a lot. And it's the idea of, just to tie it to really the idea of that Boris Johnson will be the one to turn the page of history regarding the conflict of Ukraine. That's where it tells me he was ordered, and I there is no if and buts. And again, that's my own opinion. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I bet you he got the orders from the White House to go ahead, and because the U.S. would not want to show up into that. So what do you do? Push the UK Prime Minister to do this because he was already a preconceived notion that he's going to lose the elections.
Yeah,
this is where Sunak came out because already the British people start to get fed up
Oh
with
my
Boris.
God.
That was
with
back
Bor-
then,
Yeah.
which
of
we all know
course.
what took
Jeez.
place for that. So the idea of him to go and the Western population won't even aware of what was taking place.
Yeah.
And you wonder, Europeans are also, and again, I'm not collectively putting everybody in one basket here,
Right.
but the European population, they kind of were like their cousins in America were asleep.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
and that's where
absolutely.
things ends up going a different direction, is because if you only also know what's been disclosed now by none other than NATO Secretary General,
What?
that the war or the conflict has been since 2014.
Oh, yeah.
They
Absolutely.
disclosed that one.
Which we also
Yeah.
knew.
So what happened with that?
Yeah.
That tells you that what took place in 2014 in Ukraine was already a setup
Yeah.
under the Obama administration at that time. Of course, Victoria, the evil Victoria Nolan, won over there. And we all know the history of that, the maiden, or the, what do you call it? The color revolution, whatever, yellow, in any color, whatever you're using for that. The point is that conflict started from way back.
Right.
And for the incompetent idiot Boris Johnson to prevent, because like the Russian president said, and I did see it, the document, because he was
They
disclosed
I think
it.
he held it up at some way.
That
Yeah.
the Ukraine were about to enter into a peace with the negotiations with Russians, and Russians were willing to negotiate whatever to the last minute. And I knew it back then. That actually I knew it way before that. That whatever the comedian Z will be nothing but an actor.
Yeah.
He had to read the script the way it is presented to him.
Well, he is an actor.
Yeah, well, comedian, not even an
Right.
actor. And to me, this is when I see his end, how it's gonna be. Ain't gonna end up in his villa in Miami,
Yeah.
or
Italy.
or Italy. It's gonna end up in some back alley with the. Oh no.
We've seen it happen, unfortunately.
That's the
to
norm
other-
for somebody.
yeah,
The
to
reason
other
why,
things.
you want to know why?
Why?
Is because if he stays alive,
Yeah.
he will spill the beans.
Yeah, a lot of
And
secrets.
that
Yeah.
our entities, intelligence agencies here, CIA, but it's straightforward here, they're not gonna like that.
Yeah.
It's because of what's been done behind the scenes. And this is one of the points that brings us back to your point about we doing this because we care for our country.
Absolutely.
Well, that's for sure.
yes.
But till we fix that structure, nothing's going to change.
No.
And to fix that structure, you have to tear it down and rebuild.
You know, I will say something about that because I absolutely agree. I think at this point,
Yeah.
And this has been said for a while. It's amazing that people are just now sort of waking up to it.
Yeah.
But that almost every institution here in the United States has failed its people.
Well, of course,
Right?
including now even the international institutions,
Mhm.
ICJ as an
Mhm.
example,
Oh yeah.
the
Oh, my
International
God.
the International Court of Justice.
Yeah.
What happened to it? Where is the fairness? So
Right.
there is none, because this is a reflection now of the Western hegemony as a whole, as an entity.
Yeah.
It's collapsing.
Yeah.
This is not about just the United States,
No.
guys. This is about Western dominance,
Mhm.
because that era is coming to an end. That's just a fact. It's a reality. And this is again where it's going to take me back to Tucker Carlson about
Mhm.
his point, because I still couldn't believe when I heard his statements vis-a-vis China, the one vis-a-vis Russia. I still didn't settle well with me. I am not defending China here, by the
Yeah.
way.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You all know where I stand.
Absolutely.
But I am with what's objective.
Yeah.
Because to me, if you are to present your arguments, you have to present it objectively, which means what?
Mhm.
You're assessing both sides of it.
Yeah.
You can't tilt one over another,
Mhm.
because the statements that I heard and watched, his statements about China and all that stuff, sort of left me a little bit perplexed as to that's odd. If you are to introduce yourself as someone who is fair and objective, and I'm not denying this,
Yeah.
but you can't be cherry picking where things are gonna go.
Well, fundamentally, there is that conversation. There is that narrative going on here in the
Yeah.
United States.
Yeah.
And I mean, like I said, I'm giving Tucker Carlson credit where it's due.
Of course.
But he's not, I mean, he's certainly not perfect, right? He's
Nobody
not like,
is.
He's
No
not
one
like
is.
the voice of all that is
No,
true,
no.
right?
No.
He's just somebody who takes a deeper dive and is willing to show some things that other people aren't.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very possible in the future that he can actually take a deeper dive and a closer look at China. Instead of just sort of believing or following whatever the overall narrative or the overall rhetoric is, right?
Yeah.
And so I do think that he has that potential for the future. And Tucker Carlson, if you happen to be watching this, I challenge you to look a little bit deeper, because what Vladimir Putin actually said about China is that, and this is true, in terms of buying power, China actually is the top economy, and we've known that for a long time. So I used to spend time in Los Angeles. I used to spend a lot of time in Los Angeles. And one of the things, it was interesting, this was like a rumbling. This wasn't something that people said out loud. It wasn't something that people formally said, but they said basically that movies were no longer being made for a United States audience. They were being made for the Chinese audience. Because, I'd walk into a studio and they would say, I would say, nobody in the US is going to watch this movie.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, it's not really for the US audience. It's for the Chinese audience. And so China is, I mean, that's the truth. Vladimir Putin spoke the truth when he said in terms of buying power, China is at the top, right? And so he did address that in this interview. And,
but you need to understand the purpose of that question from Tucker Carlson.
Well, so what he asked at that point was, why does the US see Russia as the biggest threat or something? And not it was something like, and not.
Yeah, but the objective of it is to see if he can forge a wedge or draw a wedge between Russia and China. Just to get a feel for it.
Yeah.
That's what I got. And the idea that the way I got convinced is by the response of the Russian president.
Yeah.
Shut that.
Because he was like, no.
Shut it off.
It's actually
meaning
US
that
is worried about China.
You are not gonna go that direction because it won't work.
Yeah.
That's now the question I ask myself: was it intentional of Tucker Carlson to go that direction, or was it just part of the conversation? And this is where you draw the distinction between a historian and geopolitical analyst.
Right.
Tucker Carlson is not a geopolitical analyst.
Right.
He's not trained for that, but he is a historian based on his academic background. Because he was majored in history. He majored in history and so forth. That doesn't mean he can talk about that, except that if you're gonna go into the depth of this, and this is why I draw the conclusion from the response of the Russian president, not from the question, because I saw where the question of Tucker Carlson was headed to. What I did not know at that time, which direction is aimed at. And was it intentional to go that direction, or was it just part of the conversation that was not structured according to the geopolitical narrative? That's where I saw the difference. Except that the Russian president, as shrewd as he is, put an end to it. And there is a reason for that. Also, why the Russian president answered that way. It's because at this moment, where the global stage is, with the multipolar that is upon us, because we are in a multipolar order. Those who say no, the Earth's still the sole property of a sole superpower, they just are misleading themselves.
Denial is strong. Absolutely.
We are in a multipolar system, and the reason for why the Russian president had to talk in that directions is, first of all, to send a signal to China. That's one, that we do look at you as a partner.
Absolutely.
Second is to send the other message to the West, mainly the United States and NATO for that matter, that you won't be able to sort of drive a wedge between the two of us. Why? Because the two of us are the ones shaping the new global direction.
No, I think
that is the reality.
And I actually think that's accurate. And I think one of the most interesting parts of that answer, when I just was talking about the fact that China has largest buying power in the world, it's not the United States anymore. That's probably the first time most Americans have ever heard that.
Yeah, and well, because the
And-
narrative won't be allowed to be said that way.
It's not, and I think that fundamentally
Yeah.
he gave an answer that most Americans need to hear. So he goes on a little bit later to talk about the US dollar, and I have that video too
Yeah.
because it's really, really interesting. But he goes on to talk about the US dollar basically, and the fact that the US, in terms of this money printing, is actually shooting itself in the foot
Well,
because
we have been for
well,
a
and
while.
that's the thing, because countries are holding less and less dollars.
Yeah.
And so, but we don't know that fundamentally, right? Like that's not a conversation that's had here. And so it's very interesting in a sense. And like I said, I'm not saying that he's like the knower of all things. Okay. He's not
Who?
Vladimir Putin. He doesn't know.
Well,
all
he
things,
is,
but
but
aware of
he
what's
is
really
pragmatic.
happening.
He is a pragmatic
Yeah.
leader. Because, and I'll ask you the question: give me
Mhm.
an example of a Western leader that can be compared to Putin.
Absolutely not.
None.
Absolutely
Doesn't
not.
exist.
And-
Does not exist.
And not only that, our Western leaders, I saw, we'll talk a little bit more about this
Yeah.
on Rumble, because because it's an election cycle, we can't really talk
Oh, of course.
a whole
Yeah.
lot about what's
We'll circle
what's
back
going
on this. We'll circle back to
right.
this one on.
That's the fastest way
Yeah,
to
we'll
not
do
have a
that.
channel anymore is
Yeah.
to talk about that. So we'll talk about that on Rumble afterwards. But there are no Western leaders that really have that respect. And it was interesting as I was doing the research for Boris Johnson. So the Boris Johnson reply video, if you guys have not seen
let's
it,
see that one.
all right,
Let's see
it. But in the Boris Johnson reply video,
Yeah.
he basically gives like a promo for Daily Mail, for the articles in Daily Mail about it. But it was interesting because while I was looking through it, because I don't look at the Daily Mail regularly.
Well, who does?
That's
No.
not like a normal.
Yeah,
thing
just
for
turned
me.
off from all Western established
I
media stuff.
just
I won't
don't.
tell you the truth.
But they on there, they were talking about I think they called it bumbling Joe Biden or something. And I was like,
Befitting.
man, people in the United States, if you think that people around the world respect our leadership,
No,
they don't.
No,
They don't. And
no.
people need to know that.
It's the
because
truth.
They're like, oh, well, nothing outside of the US matters. That's not true.
That's stupidity.
We're
know.
a global
They don't know.
economy. That's
don't
that's absolutely not true. All right, here we go. Oh, I'm gonna cover that because I don't know if I can put that word on here.
Around the world, people are watching that ludicrous interview with Vladimir Putin conducted by Tucker Carlson, and we must not fall for this tissue of lies, above all for the notion that Putin is somehow fated to succeed in Ukraine. On the contrary, he is doomed to fail. Read about it in the Daily Mail.
Read about it in the Daily Mail.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
What?
Yeah, here's a question. A side note. This is has nothing to do with all this. Do you know the background of Boris Johnson? Ancestors were from?
No, I don't.
Yeah. Can you guys type in if you know?
No, I don't.
His
I don't know.
ancestors. We go back way back. If you know the answer, type in chat box and I'll take a look at it later on.
Interestingly enough, if you notice, he did not deny it in the video.
Well, it's because you can't.
He didn't say no. I
Yeah. Because
right?
the truth, you can't. Truth, like we always say, truth will come out eventually. This is one of those. But for him to, it just highlight the idea of how much Western audience had been manipulated for a long time, including, and this is where that idea of when I asked the question earlier, who's a Western leader you could compare to Putin? None.
Nobody.
And this is not about glorifying Putin, whatever. No, it's about the facts that the guy is very shrewd, is pragmatic, knowledgeable about history, and understand how to articulate the geopolitical issues. This is why. One point before I forget, I need to go back to when I talked earlier about his answer to Tucker about China. And all that.
Okay.
I mentioned two, but there was one third element.
Yeah.
And the third element has to do with something that is going on right now in Asia. Nobody knows about. We have deployed special ops near China's border, close by.
That seems like a great
makes
call.
you now
Good
wonder, okay, why all this? But also because this coincided also with North Korea testing a missile. They just did. And all this to highlight to you again what Vladimir Putin was responding to Tucker Carlson's question about China and all that, to make a point that the West will not be able to succeed to draw that wedge between China and Russia, because two countries are driving the new global order.
Well, and fundamentally, we should not be making our largest debt holder, our largest customer, an enemy. Fundamentally, that's a bad idea. And I do appreciate, like I said, I'm not a fan of Putin or not. That's not.
Well, in geopolitics, there is no such thing as a fan.
Right.
I'll have to
people do bad things, people do good things.
Yeah,
so
it's
I'm not going to say, oh man, what a glory. No, it's not about that.
It's about pragmatism.
But I do appreciate his pragmatism in that situation. Do I think that, honestly, when he said, to continue to fight Russia instead of taking that, he said, well, that was an acceptable, proposition. I was like, man, I don't know. I guess I would have fought a little bit harder, but at the same time, I don't know, because if you're the UK, right? If you're the UK, what real reason do you have to go in and tell Ukraine to fight Russia instead? Do you know what I mean? And don't give me democracy. Because I've heard that argument.
That's nonsense.
It's about democracy. Well, you know what? If you postpone presidential elections in a country, that's not democratic. That's not my personal view of what democracy is, right? So,
well, we don't even have to go far there. We don't have to go far over there. Look at it right here in our country.
I know. We'll talk about that on Rumble. We'll talk about it on Rumble.
Yeah, don't get me started.
Love YouTube.
Don't get me started.
I want to keep our.
But actually, let me take a look, because I need to look at some answers here.
Okay.
Well, Hamed CV, you got it, man. Did you know Boris Johnson's ancestors are from Turkey?
Turkey.
Yeah.
I think I did know that.
That's
actually.
where.
I don't really think about Boris Johnson very much, if I'm being honest.
What would you think about? The guy is a clown, another clown for.
No.
It was just a joke. So.
Oh my gosh.
It's the British people.
Yeah.
Those the one have to decide who they vote for, what and so forth. They voted for Boris Johnson. That's their decision, not ours. We'll go back to our point about the financial aspects.
Yeah.
Because if you can play that video about the Russian president mentioning.
Yes, I can.
Because very important. This is something most Americans, and I still say it, are oblivious to how much this is going to change their life.
Oh, sorry, hold on.
Upside down.
The U.S. dollar
has to do with the financial aspect. Most of us in America, those who are aware of really what lies ahead financially, it's very, very concerning. I can only imagine the people who do not know.
Oh my gosh.
When it hits them, what they're going to be doing, because it will be too late for. And the Russian president during the interview, he pointed that out.
Yeah.
It's a reality that you and I understand. The politicians in Washington understand, but they're pretending to sidestep and say, no, let's keep funding the conflict. Let's keep creating conflict. Let's keep printing money.
Yeah.
And I always argued, the more you print, the less likely, the lower you drop your currency value. You devalue your currency, basically.
Well, and a couple of really big things happen in that regard, but I do very much appreciate that a lot of the things that Vladimir Putin is saying, the really good U.S. economists are also saying.
Agreeing to
right?
That. Yes.
The U.S. economists are and I think he actually says that in here, that the U.S. economists, the good ones, are saying the same thing. That fundamentally, so I actually heard there's like a YouTube video somewhere that basically said, oh, money printing is not a problem because it's actually the labor market that, whatever. Although I understand we have more than just the US to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, even if there's one hegemon, right? Even if there's one empire that's sort of bigger than the rest, we are a global economy fundamentally. And if people don't want to hold our dollars anymore, if people don't want to use our dollars anymore, they lose value on the global stage. And we don't make anything here. We don't make goods here.
We don't produce anything.
Most of our food doesn't even come from here. And so if people don't want our currency, the United States fundamentally is really in trouble. So you ready to play this?
Yeah, let's do that.
There it is.
Dollar, which has kind of united the world in a lot of ways, maybe not to your advantage, but certainly to ours. Is that going away as the reserve currency, the universally accepted currency? How have sanctions, do you think, changed the dollar's place in the world?
You know, to use the dollar as a tool of foreign policy struggle is one of the biggest strategic mistakes made by the US political leadership. The dollar is the cornerstone of the United States power, but they won't stop printing. What does the debt of $33 trillion tell us about? As soon as the political leadership decided to use the US dollar as a tool of political struggle, a blow was dealt to this American power. I would not like to use any strong language, but it is a stupid thing to do and a grave mistake. Look at what is going on in the world. Even the United States allies are now downsizing their dollar reserves. Seeing this, everyone starts looking for ways to protect themselves. But the fact that the United States applies restrictive measures to certain countries, such as placing restrictions on transactions, freezing assets, etc., causes grave concern and sends a signal to the whole world. Do you even realize what is going on or not? Does anyone in the United States realize this? What are you doing? You are cutting yourself off. All experts say this. Ask any intelligent and thinking person in the United States what the dollar means for the US. You're killing it with your own hands.
I got a point there.
US.
He's,
Absolutely.
ask, you know what he said? He didn't say ask Americans.
Right.
Ask any intelligent individual.
Right.
And let me say thank you to Jorge.
Oh, thank you.
This is Jorge Mojica. Thank you so much for your super sticker. You wrote great work, Elizabeth and Dr. O. Learning a lot on today's show.
Oh,
Thank you very much, Jorge. Truly, truly appreciate your support. It means a lot. So to go back to the point of the Russian president about the financial aspect, it's because the de-dollarization process, it's going faster than Washington has ever anticipated.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at it now, even with a country like Egypt, which we will talk about. By the way, there is something going on. We can't talk about it here. Egypt.
Yeah.
Egypt currency is sinking.
Next.
Yeah. Egypt currency is sinking,
Yeah.
but also because there are some dynamics going on and all that stuff. So the idea of the world is holding less and less dollar because they are also seeing where that trajectory is headed. And the smart country, smart leader that care for the welfare and the well-being of the citizens will take the necessary steps to prevent the collapse from happening. This is something we are not seeing, of course, here in this country. And second, we're not seeing it in Europe collectively. Yeah. Look at European economy where it is.
No, absolutely. And it's interesting to me because I think so there's a theory, right, that's floating around basically saying that, the US is more or less going to inflate the debt away. Okay. Like we're going to inflate our debt away.
Yeah.
And it's more complicated than that, but the simple version is inflate the debt away. The problem is it's not like other countries can't see that inflation.
What's going on?
Right?
That's true.
It's not like they don't know that there's inflation here and that there's massive inflation here, right? And so it's not like they're not watching that same process happen. And so it's clear, and he's right. I mean, even the US allies, when your allies are no longer holding that for you.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with somebody that I consider very, very intelligent and very, very well educated. And he said to me, well, but the Saudis are really still our ally. And I reminded him, of not very long ago when the Saudis would not pick up Biden's call when he was calling to ask them to lower oil prices. I think it was because OPEC Plus had gotten together and they put the price block on there.
Yeah.
And I was like, the Saudis were originally who was holding the dollar, right? The Saudis originally were the ones who through lots of history and many deals and all of this, they were the ones who were basically enforcing US dollar or the petrodollar, right? Dollar for oil. They're not doing that anymore. And I don't understand, first of all, how people are not screaming this from the rooftops.
Yeah.
Okay. Because if the petrodollar is not in charge anymore and the United States is no longer the largest purchasing power entity,
Uh-huh.
how are people not screaming these things from the rooftops? And I can understand in a sense, why there's like a fear of China, because China is the rising power. And yes, they have problems, guys. Don't come at me.
Well,
they have
every
problems.
country has a problem.
And they
Yeah,
do
every
have,
country.
especially internal real estate, there's some big problems.
Yeah, but that's only one aspect among many. Tell me this.
Right.
Tell me this. Tell me this.
Yeah.
Few days ago, 2 individuals inside the government
Mhm.
were charged with corruption. They went to the court. The Chinese government took them to court.
Yeah.
They took picture. They're gonna be sentenced. Whatever they do, maybe executed. Whatever,
Yeah.
whatever they do, it's their country.
Not my
But
country.
here is the thing: did we hear anything from the West saying about human rights? You know why? You know why? Because if we would have ever said human rights regarding the corruption,
Yeah.
look what's going on in our system.
Oh no. Oh yeah.
I wish someone will be held accountable publicly.
Yeah.
Information will be released to the public
Yeah.
that John Doe been caught in a corruption
Right.
and is going to be held liable, pay the fine, go to prison,
Right.
whatever the terms of the law are.
But there is none. There are
Yeah.
no accountabilities, and fundamentally, you are absolutely right. That is something that China does very differently than we do.
Yeah.
Because so, like the CEO of Evergrande, for example, he is absolutely being held accountable.
Well, it has to,
Right?
because people's livelihood was lost.
Absolutely. But when people's livelihood here in the United States
Yeah,
is lost, no one is held accountable for that.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
so-
China, yeah, they have their own issues. There are some
And they
internal
do.
issues
They
they're
do,
working on.
absolutely.
But on the other hand, you look at the big picture.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at, if I am to do an assessment, which I can't do just on the internet, I have to be on the ground to see with
Sure,
my own
sure.
eyes. And I mean, I take the same example Tucker Carlson did
Yeah.
when he was walking around in Moscow. Couldn't believe when he saw the subway in Moscow in
Yeah.
comparison to the one in New York.
Oh, it's so gross.
It is. It's the reality of it. I will be doing the same thing.
know.
I will look at the infrastructure, for example, for the high-speed trains in China and compare it to the US, only for Americans to wake up and see with their own eyes that the reason why we don't have a high-speed train is
Yeah.
because the lobbyists are not allowing it.
I know.
So the
And I
airline
really
industry-
wish there was one.
That is, and this is what I'm saying. Does China have some issues to deal with? Yes, of course. But I
Yeah.
look at the welfare and the well-being of its citizens,
Yeah.
where they are in comparison to where we are.
Well,
That's to
and
me what the comparison is going to
so it's interesting because over I love how this always happens in the wee hours, right?
Yeah.
So in the wee hours is when the Senate passed this 95 billion Ukraine Israel Taiwan package.
be.
Okay.
Wow.
So it is going to get, I think it is going to get like, pushed down or put down in the House, because
Yeah.
there is no will in the House to do it. But it was very interesting because so 22 we'll talk about this more on Rumble.
Yeah.
But the point is, what Rand Paul said as he finished, and I'll show that video on Rumble. What he said is putting Americans last. So fundamentally, even this legislation that we're looking at, and to me, the amount of people that voted on it, that voted in yes, Americans, take a look at your policymaker who voted
Yeah.
yes, because it was a lot of people, all Democrats, and most, I think it's like half or so of the Republic. Check it out, who voted for that. Okay.
Yeah.
But he said it's put Ukraine first, America last. And I think that's how Americans are really starting to feel, is that Americans are fundamentally last in every single way.
Well, because we are allowing it. We are allowing it. So that's just the hard facts, the reality of it. Till people, I don't know. It's still, this is more than just doing shows or talking about it. Till people wake up intellectually and start to understand, nothing's going to change. We want to say thank you to Jorge Moreira
thank you.
for becoming a member on the channel. So thank you so much
Yes.
for your support. It means a lot, and we truly and greatly appreciate it.
Let's talk about locals really quick.
Yeah, we'll be on the locals tomorrow, guys. at 14:30, and because Thursday we won't be able to do it. Elizabeth will be out of town, and I mean, I can do locals by myself, but what's the point? We want to have
to be honest, our
conversation.
locals conversation
Because
is
it's
my
laid back.
favorite
It's laid back.
conversation of the week.
It's laid back because one of those laid back. But anyway, just to wrap this up here.
Also locals. Guys, a lot of our videos have gotten demonetized. So if you would like to support us, join our locals. We do live streams there. What I really want to build up is I want to build up a community where you guys can talk to each other. So I need your help to do that. So join our locals. I want a place where no matter where you are in the world, you can have that conversation with each other, not just in the comments of something, but a real conversation and a conversation with us where we don't have to sort of hide what we're saying. So if you'd like to support us, please consider checking out our locals page.
Yeah. I thought we live in a democracy, so we don't have to worry about it.
Well, democracy is the most important thing, David. In case you didn't know, everybody around the world needs it. In case you didn't
so
know,
we need to promote democracy.
We need to make sure that we promote it.
Sure,
yes, that is definitely true.
But don't they say that foreign policy starts at home? Did we fix our home first before we tell other countries?
Let me look around.
Doesn't look
no,
like it.
I don't think so.
Well, then we shouldn't be telling other countries what to do.
Well, and it's interesting because the homeless problem, no matter where you are in the United States, is getting worse and worse and worse. And I'll say more about this on local.
Yes, we'll talk later on. So
Rumble.
Rumble. So.
Immediately after this, the link is in that pinned comment up there. That like white and yellow pinned comment up there is the link to our Rumble immediately after this.
So let me say something quickly to wrap up this here.
Yeah.
Just for you guys to understand the whole interview. Once again, you give credit where credit is due. Yeah, I personally, and I speak for myself, I applaud Tucker Carlson for doing this. Truly, for all the heat he got back from some idiots in Washington and Ursula liar, whatever. She said he can be traveling to Europe, impose sanction on a guy. Who the heck are you to decide on but I bet you it was the Biden administration that allowed her to say something like this, because the US government will not sanction directly a US citizen. Sanctions applies mainly to foreign entity.
No, he really put himself out there.
Yeah, but at the same, well, that comes with a responsibility also. You can be, because if I recall, and I do remember his days at Fox, and I listened, and which I don't trust any of them whatsoever. No. But the fact you give credit where credit is due. I still have that challenge with him about, and I'll be happy to debate him on it regarding his views towards China. That just, to me, it's a very troubling, again, for me as a geopolitical analyst.
Yeah,
I'm not arguing about it from a sense of an opinion or whatever. He's entitled to his opinion, whatever, like you do sometimes. I disagree with you, and I'll tell you whatever.
Absolutely.
But when it comes down to geopolitical aspects of it, that's where I see one of the challenges. But you give him credit,
absolutely,
for what he did. Even though other journalists saying, well, we were trying to interview. No, you're lying.
Yeah.
You're lying. Some of them tried, but they were turned down.
Right.
And all that stuff.
Well, and I think he was turned down for a while also, but I think that
it's because the NSA was spying on him. This plan of his, it was in the works for 3 years.
Yeah.
NSA tapped into his phone, start reading his text messages. So what happened to the Fourth Amendment? So to me, it was like, you call a spade a spade.
Absolutely.
Our government had no right, nor the authority to spy on an American citizen.
Yeah.
And for some idiot from a neocon in Washington to say, you shouldn't allow him back in the country. Who the heck are you to say that?
Yeah, why?
The country doesn't belong to you. Yeah. We all came from somewhere. Because the land belonged to the Indians. Let's just be fair about it. Because if we are to make that argument, we pack our stuff.
No, absolutely. No, and fundamentally, it is, to me, it doesn't make any sense to silence voices. If they were not, honestly, if both governments actually had been more open, I would have said, okay, well, maybe there's something, whatever.
Yeah.
But no, the fact that they're so against even hearing someone's voice.
Well, it's more of our government doing that.
And we have a whole thing in the United States here about letting everybody, speak their voice, be who they are, express themselves, whatever. and somehow we're not going to allow that. And somebody who has the courage to go and get somebody's voice,
yeah,
on
that's just on a
record.
paper. What we have on a paper is the idea of this democracy is dying, has been dying in the US after the 60s, and that's about time for it. So, all right, guys, we're gonna sign out here, and we link up with you on a Rumble within 5-10 minutes. So look forward to seeing you. As always, prepare yourself for a changing world order. Till next time, or till soon.